So it looks like another season where the Heat are quote unquote running it back. I know they have a lot of nice young guys coming in, and as a Heat fan, of course, we're excited about guys like Josh Christopher and Keyshawn Johnson, even the draft picks, Khalil Ware, Pallel Larson, but the rest of these guys, are they bad contracts? Do the Heat have a bunch of negative assets? That's what I want to look into here today. So let's look at their current cap sheet. Now, the one thing that I do want to note is that the Heat have an open roster spot, but they can't actually fill it even with a minimum guy because that would put them over the second apron. If you look in the top right corner, they're currently $1.2 million under the second apron, and you do want to avoid that at all costs because the ramifications are pretty bad. So this is not a case of, oh, Mickey Harrison's being cheap again. No, I do get why they want to avoid that. So that means as of right now, they can't sign a 15th player, but they can in January. And that's when a guy like Keyshawn Johnson, his two-way days would run up. So by that time, they would be allowed to sign him. But as it stands today, this is their cap sheet. Now, one thing that I find concerning is that between their top 5 guys, Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Terry, and Duncan, those 5 take up over 111% of the salary cap, which is insane. For a Heat team that was an 8 seed the last couple years, having that much money tied up into 5 guys that there's questions about, there's even questions about their fit, that part's concerning to me. I mean, even if you want to say, okay, Jimmy and Bam are the stars, and just look at the other 3 guys, Tyler, Terry, and Duncan, well, those 3 take up over 52% of the cap. We're still sitting here wondering if Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier can even play together. One of those 3 is going to come off the bench, and that's just a lot of money for 3 guys who now have injury concerns to be making over 50% of your cap. That's a problem. Now, as far as the rest of the roster, I think everyone is paid, pretty fairly. I do like the contract that Haywood Highsmith got, although it seems to be higher than what other teams were offering him. I would have been willing to give him like $7 million per year, and he only ended up getting 5.2. Caleb Martin, I do not think that would have been a good contract if they gave him the $15 million a year that he turned down. So although it kind of scares me that Philly got him, I think that he kind of dodged the bullet by not giving Caleb Martin all that money. Now, the biggest question marks on this roster as to why the Heat would do it, I guess, is re-signing Thomas Bryant. But he actually accepted less money because he opted out of a player option and re-signed for less money. So I got a feeling that he kind of had like a side conversation with him and said, hey, do us a solid, opt out, sign for less, and we'll give you something on the back end somewhere down the line. So I know a lot of Heat fans are mad that we re-signed Thomas Bryant because especially with Khalil Ware breaking out in the Summer League, it doesn't seem necessary, but again, I think there was something else going on there. The only guy that the Heat signed this offseason that it is new is Alec Burks, who for a minimum seems like great value. He's a pretty phenomenal shooter, but does it make sense to sign him when he might not even play over a guy like Josh Richardson, when you could have used that roster spot for a guy like Keyshawn Johnson or Isaiah Stevens, who provides something different to this team? Is it possible they could have even got someone better than Alec Burks, like Gary Trent Jr., just got onto a minimum with the Milwaukee Bucks? Well, all that stuff is a topic for a different video. But I want to focus on the 3 guards that we mentioned, Duncan, Tyler, and Terry. I want to go through their contracts and actually discuss whether I think they're negative assets or not. So starting with Duncan Robinson, he has 2 years left on his deal, with the second year being a player option. He'll be getting approximately $19 million a year. And I want to say that 2 seasons ago, in 22-23, I thought he potentially had the worst contract in the entire league. He was shooting 33% from 3 on high volume, 5 attempts a night. And to be a shooter, to be known as a sniper, that's what he's getting paid for. To be 33% on high volume is terrible. He also played 42 games. I know he had a finger injury, got surgery for that. But before that, he was getting DNP coaches' decisions. That's how bad he was. So I do think 2 seasons ago, he had potentially the worst contract in the league, but I kind of changed my mind last season. He shot 40% from 3 on 7 attempts, which is pretty great. He was improved defender. He didn't get 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes of the game like he was doing the previous seasons. His versatility went up a ton. His percentage of shots from 3 went down, meaning that, his overall shot diet was looking a lot more versatile, which I think is never a bad thing. His passing was very impressive. He had a career high in assists. His 2-man game with Bam Adebayo continues to be amazing. And Bam just signed a monster extension. He's the cornerstone of your franchise. So having a guy in Duncan Robinson that pairs so well with him, I just think is a great thing to have. So I do think Duncan had a pretty great season last year. Now, on the season, he will be making about $19.5 million next year. So I wanted to compare that with some other guys around the league that are getting paid about as much as he is. So we'll kind of run through these names here. Miles Turner, Jakob Poeltl, and then there's Duncan Robinson. Then you got Norman Powell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Keldon Johnson, Evan Fournier, random scrub heat killer Hall of Famer, that bum. And then you also got D'Angelo Russell and Colin Sexton. Now, a few weeks ago, Bobby Marks had a report basically saying that teams weren't interested in Duncan Robinson. And I posted a video sharing my opinion about that and said that I don't actually think Duncan is that bad a contract. And a lot of the comments that I got on that video was saying, don't compare Duncan, to what guys got paid on previous contracts. Compare Duncan's value to what guys got paid this offseason. So I said, you know what? That's a good point. And I went through all the free agent signings of this offseason, went to the shooters, and I looked at how much those guys got paid. So I want to start with Malik Beasley. He was a 41% three-point shooter on 7 attempts, and he signed for a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Pistons. And keep in mind, he was just coming off $15 million a year with Minnesota just a couple seasons prior. So his annual salary was more than cut in half. And that's for a guy that was shooting 41% on 7 attempts, even better than Duncan Robinson. Another guy that got signed, well, obviously, Alec Burks. He shot 38% from 3 last year on 5 attempts. Very good season. And, of course, he signed with a minimum for the Miami Heat. Luke Kennard shot 45% from 3 with the Grizzlies on 6 attempts. And he's currently still a free agent. The Grizzlies actually declined his $15 million player option. So obviously, whenever he does sign, he'll get much less. Isaiah Joe, 42% from 3 on 5 attempts, and he signed 4 years, $48 million with OKC, which only averages to 12 a year. So that's about over 7 less than what Duncan is going to be making. A lot of people brought up Buddy Hield, 39% from 3 on 7 attempts, and he just got paid a 4-year, $37 million deal. That's only 9 a season. $10 million less than what Duncan will be making next year. And keep in mind as well, Buddy Hield was coming off $23 million a year salary. Gary Trent Jr., 39% last year, 6 attempts, great season. He signed a minimum contract with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he was coming off $17 million a year with the Toronto Raptors. Now, I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you, but the trend is clear. Shooters are not getting paid like they used to. Now, I should stress, I do think Duncan Robinson is a better and more versatile shooter than most of these guys. Duncan's not just a guy that sits in the corner. No, he's flying off of screens, and the gravity that he draws is really critical to a team's offense. He's a 6'7" movement shooter. His difficulty of shots are crazy. He attacks closeouts very well, uses pump fakes, and we talked about, the versatility of his passing, the versatility of his offense that we saw last season. So I think he's better than a lot of those guys. But do I think he's $10 million better? Double, triple what some of those guys are getting paid? No, not at all. So my official verdict is no. I don't think it's a great value contract, but a very skilled player with only 2 years left, including a player option. I wouldn't consider him a negative asset, although it's not a sensational value. Next, I want to talk about Terry Rozier, who has 2 years left on his contract. He'll be getting paid about $25 million next season and about $26 the year after that. There was obviously some injury concerns with Miami to end last season, had the weird neck injury. We have no idea how the hell that happened, but we do know that he will be cleared for training camp, or he's actually already cleared now. But in his time with Miami, after they traded for him the second half of the season from Charlotte, I thought he had a nice finish, right? He was able to get to the rim, which was a breath of fresh air coming from Kyle Lowry, who couldn't do none of that. I do think Terry Rozier held his own defensively. There was a lot of questions on that, but I feel like he stayed in front of his guy for the most part. And obviously, he was just a great scorer. He was shifty as hell, could get you a bucket when you needed it, got hot from 3 several times, had some monster games like versus Dallas and versus Cleveland, where he just got insanely hot, almost carrying you to wins. And his facilitating, I thought, was very great as well, averaging almost 5 assists with the Heat last season. Now, because he is getting paid about $25 million next season, again, I wanted to compare that with other guys who are in that range. So you got Jaren Jackson Jr., who fraudulent DPOY, but still borderline all-star. You got Jalen Brunson, who obviously is sensational, but his extension didn't quite kick in yet. And when it does, he'll be getting paid $34 million a year. So a lot more than Terry Rozier when that extension does kick in. But then you got Terry Rozier. And after that, you got Draymond Green, who's washed up. Kyle Kuzma, who's a decent player. Mikal Bridges, he's severely underpaid, and he's due for a monster extension soon also. So that's, kind of not a great comparison there. But then you got Jaden McDaniels, who's a pretty good player. Bruce Brown, pretty good player. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Brook Lopez, same thing. So I kind of call this the pretty good player tier, and I think Terry Rozier fits right into that. Now, you traded a first-round pick to get Terry Rozier, and I think with only 2 years left on his deal, and with how good he performed last season, I think if the Heat wanted to trade him, I do think they could get a first-round pick back in return. So my official verdict is Terry Rozier is not a negative asset. And finally, the man of the hour, Tyler Herro, someone who's one of the most polarizing players in Heat history, especially when you consider all the money that he's making next year. Well, he's got 3 years left on his deal, $29 million next year, $31 million the year after that, and then $33 million the following season. Now, I will say his numbers last year weren't bad. I mean, if you don't look at the games played, he's obviously had some injury concerns. Pat Riley called him fragile. Those are his words, not mine. But outside of the injuries, he did score 21 points per game last year and shot 44% from the field and 40% from three on high volume. So the numbers are good. But my thing with Tyler Herro is I don't like the fit here, at least not in this starting lineup. I always said that here he should come off the bench and kind of be that microwave scorer like Lou Williams was. And for a guy that's owed $29 million next season, I just think that's way too much for a bench player. But that doesn't mean that Tyler Herro can't start on other teams, because I certainly don't think he's a bad player. I just think he needs a change of scenery. But let's compare that $29 million that Herro is making next season with some other guys around the league. You got Devin Vassell, Kristaps Porzingis, then you got Tyler Herro, Julius Randle, Isaiah Hartenstein, John Collins, Andrew Wiggins, Anthony Simons, RJ Barrett, and Jonathan Isaac. So I'll say that Tyler Herro is better or close to as good as some of these guys like Devin Vassell, Anthony Simons, RJ Barrett. I think he's on par with those guys, but some of them are definitely better than Tyler Herro. That'll be your Porzingises and your John Collins and your Wiggins. But those guys that I just named have notoriously some of the worst contracts in the entire league. I mean, Boston literally got 2 first-round picks to take on Porzingis' contract because obviously he can't stay healthy, and we saw that in the playoffs last year. Andrew Wiggins, he's a former all-star starter, sure, but now his contract is considered untradeable. It's looked at as one of the worst contracts in the entire league. Now, I know he's had some, personal problems outside of the basketball court, and he's still not that old, so maybe he can turn his career around, but right now, his contract is looked at as untradeable. And the Jazz traded only Rudy Gay and 1 second-round pick for John Collins. So that tells you what people thought of his contract, because that's a guy that was scoring like 20 points per game earlier in his career. And for him to get moved for a washed-up Rudy Gay and a second-round pick, like I said, that's all you need to know about how his contract is looked around the league. So my final verdict on Tyler Herro's contract is that it's not the worst in the league. That'll probably go to Andrew Wiggins or Jordan Poole, who wasn't even in this list because he gets paid more than all of these guys. But I do think that Tyler Herro is a negative asset, and I think that's clear at this point. Think about all the stars that have wanted to come to Miami in the last several seasons. You had Damian Lillard, you had Kevin Durant. The Heat now, they can't entice the Jazz to send over Lauri Markkanen because nobody wants our assets. And our biggest, most popular asset for all of these years has been Tyler Herro. So that being said, let me know what y'all think down below. Do you think these guys were negative assets? What do you think their trade value is around the league? I'll be very curious to hear what y'all think. Make sure to like the video and subscribe because I do greatly appreciate all the support. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.
Look, pull up in your city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.